the bell has rung. So get seated and join Elementary Schooled for today's interview.
Hi.
Hi, how are you, Melanie?
I'm so grateful to you. You are my first guest, and I'm so excited because you're my friend, and I just respect you so much as an educator and a teacher, and just as a person. I'm so grateful for you and the time we were able to spend together at a school and work together, and it just wasn't long enough. But
it wasn't long enough.
It wasn't.
You're
long
amazing.
enough. So maybe we can do it again.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
My name is Melanie Whipple, and I am the host of this podcast. This is Elementary Schooled, Season 1, Episode 1. And I'm so excited to introduce my first guest, Lisa RONNENKAMP. The topic of this episode is specifically for elementary school parents. Today, your top 3 questions that you are going to be answered by the lovely Lisa RONNENKAMP. So thank you. And I just want to clarify a little bit that I did send out a survey. I am currently a 4th grade teacher, and just a quick background, I graduated in 1994 from Brigham Young University in elementary education, and I taught for many years, and then I stayed home with my kids for many years, and then I went back in 2014, and I've been in a job share pretty much since then. Job share means every other day, but in case our listeners don't know. So I'm so grateful to work with kids every day. You and I both, we have worked with such great people there every day. I just am so amazed at the nurturing and care that I see in other teachers and just great professional people. And I work with so many good families, and you have worked with so many good families. And the whole purpose of this is to have parents and educators that we can just have more communication, smoother communication, to really get to the heart of our kids and help them. And so I just have this strong belief that when you strengthen a child, you really do strengthen society. And there's a lot that goes along with that. So thank you. I am just so grateful. And I currently teach in a 4th grade classroom, but I sent the survey just to friends. So I don't involve my current families. I want to just protect confidentiality. And so any coincidences that we talk about really are just coincidences, because I sent surveys out to just friends and neighbors and wanted to get some feedback, and they had a lot of questions, but I chose 3, and maybe we'll do a bonus. But will you introduce yourself, and let's focus on you?
Oh, well, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for the honor of calling me. I just think highest of you. So thank you for inviting me. And I too graduated about 92. So I've been around for 24 plus years in the classroom as a teacher, and then on the district end, and then assistant principal and principal for the last 8 years. And so I've seen different parts, and I've been a parent, so I've seen all the different aspects of that. And I think it's important, as you were talking, that we all I think working together makes the best outcome for the student and the learning, because when you're disconnected and maybe the parents don't understand, and there's a lack of that, then we can't fully help that student or move that student to their achievement level. So it's great to have that, and you are stellar at doing that with your parents and with your classroom. It's amazing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And what I've learned in life is it's all about the trying, right? It's about trying.
Right.
And so, like I said, and too, we say that in the classroom. So all the time, I'll say to the kids, if you're trying, you are successful. That is success if you're trying. So I really appreciate you, because your experience is so valuable. And I have worked with a lot of administrators over the years, and different districts and different states. And you do have that magic balance of really connecting with families and staff, but at the heart of it is what matters the most, and that is the kids, and are their needs being met. So thank you.
Yes, it was.
And
Well,
let's
and
jump
thank
in. I do want to,
Okay.
these were the top 3 questions. And
Wonderful.
just
Okay.
so
Well,
anyone listening
perfect.
knows, like, I gave you the questions, but I told you, don't give me your responses, because I want to just hear them and talk about them together, just naturally and authentically.
Right.
And so the first question, this quote says, "My child did not get the teacher we requested this year. What is this process like, and why couldn't my request be met?" What do you say to that?
And I can see that on both sides, because with my 3 daughters going through school, I always, want this teacher, this teacher, this teacher, for whatever reason it may be. And on that side, you don't really see what's happening on the school end. So when we start in spring, as you know, looking at trying to make classes as equally divided as possible so we can meet all those students' needs, because they're very diverse. And so we look at many different aspects of that, and we have to also fit that into how many teachers we're given. So we look at all kinds of things and start placing kids early spring, looking and moving and moving and moving all summer. And I think when parents can come to me with a very good, valid reasoning as to why, I think that's best for everybody. Because if they don't get that teacher, let's say, and there's a very good, valid reason, there's going to be a little bit of frustration going on. Whereas if we're able to do that, that works well for everybody involved. It is quite a process to do and takes many hours.
Yes.
So it's not easy. It's not easy.
Thank you. And what I've seen from a teacher angle is we are asked, we do give input. And so when you mentioned that you try to make classrooms equal, it's trying to find a balance both academically and socially and emotionally.
Right.
Is that right?
Right. Correct. Mm-hmm. Yes. So
what,
one class doesn't have such a burden or, as maybe another. So we're kind of equally being able to meet as many needs as we can. So
when parents do a request, it is best to just stick with the needs of the child, right? Like, to not make it so much about the teacher, because some families maybe go through a school and they do have a favorite teacher because their older kids had that teacher, which is awesome. But if they do feel like, oh, we have some real specific needs, what do you recommend about that? Making contact with an administrator or writing a letter, what would you suggest?
Well, and I always, in the spring, have them send in and give them a timeline of if there is a request, so that I can look through those and try and place them, if I can, as evenly. But if that doesn't happen, then I do like to have parents come in, have a conversation, walk through it. If it's just the friend down the street is in that class, that may not work, because if I have 34 kids in this class and 27 in this class, I can't add another student there if it's just about that. But if there's some valid reasons of this teacher's really understanding of my student maybe with ADHD or whatever it may be, because their child has that, so I know that they can help meet those needs a little better, then I would look at that a little more seriously and see how I could make that change. But
you say requests how common are they, and are they always allowed?
Not always. Some principals ask not to, but let's be honest, you're going to get that. So I think it's every school I've been at, that's what happens. But if you give that educational reason as to why, and the purpose as to why, then that makes for an easier way to look at that than just, well, so she lives down the street from me, so I think I'll be in her class. You can find that those other 3 teachers are just as lovely as this one, and they work together all the time, and they're following that curriculum, and so and work together, and they might be in that classroom for a part of the day anyway. So it
right.
usually will work out fine. And the amount that comes in is not as much as you would think would be. So
Thank you. That's really helpful. I do have just one last follow-up question with the requests. Sometimes, you know, we like our kids to be with their friends. And
yes, well, of
I've never
course,
really
yes.
been stuck in that because I'm a teacher. I've never ever requested based on friendships, like, hey, you know, it'll be better for you to not be with your closest friends. How do you respond to that? Because I think now with a lot of anxiety with children, I can understand how maybe you would want them to be with their best friend just for a comfort level, but respond to that a little bit about reasons not to maybe be with your child with their closest friends in a class.
Well, and I talked too that you probably do know several of these kids that are going to be in your class. And with the student, usually it's at least 2 or 3 that they know. And so building some new friendships, forging that kind of a little bit of that out of comfort zone thing, but then you have those friends in there. However, you'll be out at recess at the same time.
Yes.
You'll be at lunch. You might be in a science group together. You might be in whatever together. And so you're going to have those opportunities to be together, but let this be an opportunity then to also make other friends and forge those friendships there and learn how to do that, because it is a skill.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes parents don't realize that, but it is.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
That's so great. The second question is, why does there seem to be so much documenting and smoothing over every playground issue that occurs these days? When I was a kid, we had to figure it out ourselves. I thought that was a pretty good question.
I think that's true. And I think society has changed a bit. I mean, you know, we'd go to school, somebody might punch it out and go on with the day, but we also have to look at safety. So that's key. So I think the biggest thing I have found is when I'm looking at, we are given an allotment of, based on our number of students, how many people will be outside to supervise. So I think giving the instructions of what the expectations are outside, what's appropriate, not appropriate, what's expected behavior, what's not expected behavior, but also training teachers on the same thing and training the students on the same thing and reteaching. And then one of the things that I liked at the school we were at was when the recess duties were out there, they were teaching new skills or little games. And so it's not just walking around the playground with 15 minutes of free time. They're actually engaged in what they're doing. And I enjoyed going out and playing dodgeball or foursquare or soccer. And so, you know, getting them involved, and so that that type of thing doesn't become an issue. But if it does, and if it's a safe school issue where there's violence involved or whatever, then that needs to be brought to administration. And then we keep that information, and I always call parents, but we keep that information because if there is a pattern of that behavior, there might need to be more supports implemented to help support that student, so to keep everyone else safe. So I think it's more of that safety piece and ensuring the safety of all students while they're at school, because that's our job. And I think that's where we've evolved as a society. I mean, I want to be able to send my student off to school knowing they're safe everywhere they go at the school. So
yeah, thank you. I can say this too, that sometimes, like you said, we have supervision on the playground. I think that's pretty standard everywhere. We don't want children out there when they're at their height of energy being unsupervised. And that job is very difficult. And so
it is a difficult
the
job.
people that we have out there are so great to, number one, take the job and be out there in all different kinds of weather. And what's interesting is when something does happen, it might not, do you agree with this? Might not always be a question of, I don't know if I necessarily look at it as documenting. I just think that we don't know exactly what happened. And even if you have several supervisors, you can't catch everything. There are
Right.
overlapping
Right.
recesses and things that happen, and kids will write down pretty
Mhm.
honestly what
Oh,
happened.
yes.
And
Oh,
usually it
yes.
matches up with anyone else that was involved, and they can't
Mhm.
always verbalize what happened. And so I just have found that valuable in almost any playground situation, where if they
Right.
can write it down, it just gives us a little insight, because like you said, it's just about safety and we want to help you. And if there was something physical that happened, we want
Mhm.
to help that student that might be struggling socially.
Right. And I think too, when they might come to the office, for example, and I need to write a statement, I think then that's a great moment for an administrator to then sit down with those students and do a teaching moment, because, okay, here's the situation. How could that have been handled differently? Looking at that conflict management, how do we handle that? And if you're doing that teaching in the moment, that's the best time to do it. And so I think it can just be a quick teaching moment, and then we get on with the day.
Yeah.
And and move on.
That's
And
right.
so
Thank you for saying that part,
yeah,
because I think it's
yeah,
important for parents to know that we really do. We want to know what happened, and we want to help
right,
the student needs the help. And then we're going to learn from this, and you're going to
right,
be great, and you're going to do better next time. Or I'm so sorry that you got hurt,
right.
or that was just an accident, and he
Mhm.
wasn't trying to shove you, he accidentally ran into you, or whatever it may be. But we can do a
Right,
lot of, like you said, conflict resolution, which is huge.
right.
The third question, and I saved this one kind of towards the end, because all of us are feeling after Uvalde, especially last May and ending the school
Yes.
year in such a horrific incident
It's
in
scary.
Texas.
Yeah.
A lot
Right.
of parents on the survey did mention safety and have questions, and weren't overly, like, I think most of us understand. I think many of us have probably looked into the statistic online that we're actually
Right.
more likely to get hit by lightning than be involved in a school shooting, and schools still are and do remain one of the safest places to be.
Right.
That's the good news.
Right.
The
Yes, that's
question,
good.
which I think is valid, is,
I
quote,
do too.
she says, like most parents, I am more concerned than ever before about school safety. What behind the scenes efforts are going on to improve safety at our elementary schools, where there is a high volume of parents going in and out of school every day, close quote.
But we have a safety plan every year that's rewritten and updated and approved through the state, so that they know that we are following those safety measures.
So each state writes
yeah.
that. Each state
Yes.
writes that, and it comes down
Well,
the
each right, and so each school then has to do their own where we might evacuate, where what will happen in these situations, so that if, for instance, the police were then dispatched to the school, they would know what our plan was, or where we might have to evacuate. So they're very well aware of that. We practice that throughout the year, multiple drills. So parents know that, and students know we are practicing that. It's not to scare kids, it's to practice in case anything were
any
to happen, so that they know. And I think the use of cameras now everywhere, outside the school, inside the school, we can look that up, can monitor that. The district can look at that. The police can pull those things up sometimes. We have now parents have to buzz in to even come. We lock all of the doors. And so they have to buzz in, show their ID, and explain why they're at the school before they're even buzzed in. And parents don't come down and wander through the school. They'll come down and for example, you have a lot of lovely volunteers during your specific power hour, or whatever it may be. They know exactly where they're going. We know, they sign in and then they sign out. So we keep a good idea, and we know who's in and out of our building at all times. And so while the students are at school, they are safe or responsible for them when they leave the door till they get back to their door. So there's a lot that goes into that to keep them safe, and
yes.
so that we as parents feel like, okay, they're in good hands, and I know that things are in place that makes it okay for them.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thanks for mentioning
So,
cameras, because one thing that's happened in our area, which I wasn't aware of until I saw it in the news, but I found some relief in reading this, that our area now has an updated security system where
Yes.
there really are all eyes on every school, and that schools are monitored 24/7.
Yes,
It's
yes, they
not-
are.
So if there was someone that was going to approach a school, it
Right.
would be seen on these cameras, and like you said, law enforcement would be dispatched, no matter what the threat is, because it could be something really,
They do.
it
Yeah.
could be all sorts of things. It doesn't mean active shooter necessarily, but any
No,
type
no.
of threat. But that this system, and I did find some relief in that, because I think for most of us, for me, Uvalde really hit home, because I am in a teacher co-teacher situation in a
Mhm.
fourth grade classroom, which is what that was. And it was the last week of school, and you see these beautiful faces on TV of these 21 children, and how
Right.
this has affected their community. And it's of course it's going to give all of us a little bit of anxiety,
Anxiety,
especially when
right.
it happens. And so I'm glad that you talked about that. Will you run through just quickly the parts that we can say about a lockdown drill? Because those things didn't exist when you and I were young. It was
No,
fire drills and earthquake drills. That's all I remember.
yes, that was
Here in Utah.
it.
So earthquake drills were happening. I do remember that one, like holding your desk and sitting under your desk.
And underneath, yes,
And
yes,
we still do those drills, but the lockdown and lockouts are
yes.
different.
Right. And so, and I'm not sure exactly how that comes down from the state, but it is required for us every 30 days to do a certain type of drill. And they dictate what that drill will be so that we hit all of them. So we'll have a fire drill. Then the lockout drill is where we lock all the perimeter doors. For example, let's just say there was a robbery at the Smiths down the street or whatever it may be. And just to ensure the safety of the kids, we lock those perimeter doors. We keep everything else is running smoothly inside the school, but it's just to keep the students safe until law enforcement are able to handle that situation. A lockdown is a little bit different. So if there was a danger inside the school, whatever it may be, that's when we've had a lot of training with that, but where teachers quickly lock their doors, lights out, and teachers are especially our cute teachers at school, reading quietly, playing a quiet little game, but doing that so that they're safe in their spot until the police can come through and they can unlock the door and evacuate those students out so that they are safe where they are. So we practice that a lot, and law enforcement practices with us.
Yes,
So they know what
and they
to
come
do
around and they
do it.
check each classroom. And I want
Right.
parents to know too, that when we do these, we talk to the kids about, like, I think you were the one that gave the example of a dog that maybe is
Right.
that,
Right.
kind of a wild animal or something. I don't know.
Right.
A very unique situation, but weird things do happen sometimes.
They do. They do.
Where
Yep.
we have to go on a lockdown. And when
Right.
we sit and talk with the kids, it's very quiet, and they're so good at adapting. And then
They do.
we have some calming things we can do during that time, and whispering and just talking with them. And then after, there is a good flow to it. They know it's a practice, and we kind of get right
Yes.
back to our normal routine. And
Mhm.
I've never had in all my years had anyone be in tears, but you kind of have a heads
No.
up on your more anxiety ridden children. You might have them sit closer to you, or you might talk to
Right.
them before and say, this is what
Mhm.
we're doing today. And it does go pretty smoothly, right?
It does. And I think letting the parents know ahead of time too, so that students don't come home and say, oh my goodness, this is what happened today. Parents are well aware this is a drill we're practicing. This is one of the practices we do, just like a fire drill. We're not saying that's going to happen, but we're going to practice for that. So they do just fine. They do
Thank
just
you.
fine. But those are in place for us to do. So
And
keep us safe.
there is a lot of reassurance just by having the practices done and having
Oh,
those
yeah.
things in place. So we do have set protocols. I'm sure every
Right.
state and district that
Yes.
has these same guidelines. And
Yes.
so we
Yes.
follow them. I want to ask you a bonus question before we sign
Okay.
off, just because a lot of the writing that parents did said, we're just so hoping that the COVID years, are we calling them COVID years? I think we are, that they're
I
over
know.
or mostly over, but that
Yeah.
a lot of these heightened emotions happened during COVID. They existed before COVID, but
They did.
everything
Yes.
that was an issue before COVID, it really got heightened, I think. And I think that's an
It-
observation I can definitely speak for. But in this school year, we are feeling good about kind of returning to some normalcy. And what kind of hope can you offer just to parents and families and educators about, just looking forward to good things?
Well, and I think not dwelling on the past over and over again. I think doing those positive pieces of, oh, look at us, here we are in class together, we get to do this together, focusing on what they're going to be learning and the learning process, and really moving forward that way so that the fears start diminishing. Because if we continue to just keep over and over and over and over again, the students become more heightened. And so we can have those measures of, wash your hands and whatever it may be, but just the positive part, and school. We're in
Yes.
school and we're learning, and
Yes.
this is what we're doing. And I think students are resilient, very resilient, and they will do well being in school full time and
Yes.
learning. I think that is
They're
the best
excited.
thing for
They're
them.
glad to be back.
Yes.
And I think parents
Yeah.
too. I feel like our back to
Agreed.
school night and our volunteer sheets were full, overflowing. I thought, oh,
Yes.
back in
Because that was
business.
so sad when they were not there. It was
Yes,
so
and there was
sad,
a
but
disconnect, and we all
there
felt
was.
disconnected, even in our own families, and not being able to see grandparents or whatever the
Right.
situations were. But we are
Right.
back in business, and
Yep.
I love what
It
you
builds
said
a
about-
community, right?
Yes, it's a good community feel. I love the positivity idea and the notion of just being positive, because when anything ever happens, and I've noticed this since my very first classroom experience in 1994, or well before then, because while you're doing your student teaching and doing some of your practicums, you were in different classrooms. But I noticed this: if anything ever happens, the class, they look right to you. They look at you to see what your response is. And so I love that you're saying, when we're positive, they really do feed off of that. And so I know that one of the news stations here has talked a lot about, well, the title was Crisis in the Classroom. And yeah, I don't know. I learned this from my yoga friend Tracy, but she taught me this a long time ago, that we replaced the word crisis with expansion. And I love that. Like,
there you go.
we're having a crisis in the classroom. I don't like hearing, I don't want to feel like we're having a crisis in the classroom.
No, it's not a crisis.
We are having an expansion. We did learn a lot during COVID. We learned so much about how to better connect, and when that was taken away from us, how important that piece was. And so I think we have learned, and we're just expanding and we're trying. So I love that idea. Do you have a personal story at all that you could share that one of your girls would be okay with you sharing? Just, I don't know, something that in school or as a mom or as an educator that, I don't know, that sticks in your mind. Does anything come to mind with your kids? I don't know. I was thinking about one of my kids and not wanting to come home on the school bus. Well, he did come home on the school bus, but he was coming home upset every day. And I was just like, I wonder what's happening. And he is this great kid and has all these friends. And anyway, I just got prayerful, which I, no matter what any religion anyone is, I believe in prayer. And I just got really prayerful. Like, why is he coming home so upset every day? And then I just, like, those feelings, I think, do come. And it was just like, pick him up from school every day. And I had my fourth child was a newborn, and any mom doesn't really want to pick up their child with the car seat and in the winter and all that. But I remember just really feeling it, and it made a huge difference. And so I don't know, I've just always remembered that, like, just say a little prayer in your heart and pray for your kids' teachers, we pray for our children, and we pray for those that are working with them. And that's just something that I learned from.
Well, and I think too, they always talk about mother's intuition. I think and fathers.
Yes.
But I think when something is going on with your student at school, like I'm thinking of my oldest child and noticing, and I think you're going to address this in another podcast about some ADHD things, but
Yep.
some things that I'd gone through for a few years and my gut was telling me something's not right. And it took me a couple of years to go, okay, I need to stand up and advocate for that child and
Right.
trust my gut for that, because sometimes you kind of go, well, maybe not because it's my child and I'm over worrying, but
Right.
trust that instinct and
Yes.
keep with it and advocate for your child, because let me just tell you, some of those kids don't have that. And so I just admire parents who come in and advocate for their children and for their education and for their success, because gosh, life's hard enough as it is, right? So
Yes,
I
it's
greatly
never,
appreciate
it's
that.
never a mistake to reach out to the
Right.
teacher or anyone,
Right.
child or administrator, just to ask the question. It's always
Right.
accepted.
Right.
And then it opens up communication. And so I think that's a
Absolutely.
really, really good point. And I will say, back to this like situation with my son, it wasn't until years later that I was working over at the junior high, just doing white ribbon week or something. And an administrator mentioned that there was a certain year where the school bus behavior was really, really challenging. And it was that year. And then
That
I
year.
realized, oh my gosh, it was the bus. And so like you said, that
Yeah.
intuition of a mom, just like, I don't know what's happening. He's just doing well in school, but the end of the day is
But
not going,
something.
it was the bus.
Yes.
And so, like you said, it's that intuition and just knowing like, oh, something feels off, and just to ask the question
Right.
is
Right.
important. So thank you.
It is. It really is. It is. So anyway,
Well, I appreciate you. You answered
I
these
appreciate
questions.
you.
I think everyone will really benefit from hearing
I
just
hope so.
responses from an administrator like you, who is so sharp and good at meeting needs. And so thank you.
Same for you, my
so
dear.
much.
So
I really
yes,
appreciate
expert.
you. I just think you're the greatest. Thank you. I
And I
do
think
want
the
to
same
say
with
that if anyone has a suggestion for a future episode, requests can be sent to the following email: elementary.schooled@outlook.com. So thank you, my friend. I really
Thank you.
appreciate you, and we will sign off.
See you soon. Bye.
Submit a question or topic for further episodes, please email elementary.schooled@outlook.com. School is out for today, but please remember, when we strengthen a child, we strengthen society.